All right, this is wild, y'all. We have to talk about this Jonathan Major stuff. This news just dropped. This just came out. Okay. Jonathan Majors has been found guilty on criminal charges of assault and harassment. And the reason why I emphasize criminal, it's a pretty big deal. This wasn't a civil case, this was a criminal case, which means the burden of guilt to prove that he was guilty, okay, by a jury, that bar is much, much higher on a criminal case than it is on a civil case. And it's like that pretty much everywhere in the country, meaning there has to be some pretty definitive evidence to prove that he was actually guilty. And I've been following this pretty closely since March. And about 3 or 4 months after all of this came out, we saw some news drop with like video footage and text messages and timelines. And it seemed like Jonathan Major's team had a really strong defense for his innocence, right? And then about a month ago, some more information came out with some really weird stuff. And I think the weird stuff that came out was what kind of put everything over the edge for him in this criminal case. And that was voicemails and text messages that show a pattern of behavior. And let's be clear here, this is what people were saying about Jonathan Majors when these allegations came out. A lot of people were saying, this is who he is. This is like, we've dealt with this shit before. But a lot of people didn't want to believe it. They just were like, oh no, there's no way, there's no way. And like I said, his defense they were releasing all kinds of stuff. There was that screw up with that text message that came out very early. It didn't look good for him. But then all the video footage and the other stuff that came out did sort of seem like maybe he was not as guilty as we thought. But then the voicemails came out where he was basically sort of controlling his then girlfriend and telling her that she should be appreciative of being with him and that she should act more like Michelle Obama and Coretta Scott King, I think were the two names that he dropped, which that along with other text messages, I think that was it. That was what put everything over the edge. But that's not all. It's also fired. Marvel and Disney have finally said, hey, that's it. We're done. And there's been a lot of speculation. A lot of people have thought, like, what's going to happen with this? Are they going to let him go? They're going to keep him. For me, I thought that I said this very early on. Chances are, if they didn't let him go after the first few months, after his agents and public relations people and everyone else pretty much walked away from him, I think there was too much invested in what they were planning on doing. And corporation is going to corporate. Is that the correct phrase? I don't know. Anyway, they had too much invested in Jonathan Majors, and we just had Loki season 2. He was a pretty prominent character on that show. It's going to be really interesting to see, if people go back and are able to watch the show after knowing that he, was found guilty of all of this. But this is wild to me because he was kind of the figure that everything was circling around for the MCU over the next 2 or 3 years. And we knew there was possibly a pivot that was going to happen with this, switching into a different person to be the villain, maybe Doctor Doom, maybe someone else, maybe a recast. I think recasting is probably the smartest thing to do, but we don't know for sure what's the final resolution is going to be and what their plans are. But it's not too surprising for me. Once the guilty verdict happened, like, it already leaked out that he had been fired. So I guess there'll be a more official announcement, later on when they decide what they're going to do. But look, they're taking a year off next year. So this is the perfect opportunity for them to sort of shift gears here. And the bigger conversation to be had, though, like the one that I think is probably the most important, is this issue with like assault and all of these negative things around like Hollywood in general. For someone like Jonathan Majors, who was kind of becoming like this breakout star, who really, this was it. Like, this was setting him up for like a massive future in film, not just Marvel, but in film in general. He's had other great things he's worked in as well. Just to see how like the world of Hollywood sort of works and the kind of things that goes on in Hollywood. It leads to a deeper conversation. We've been dealing with this for a while now with like different things coming out, people that are found guilty of all kinds of awful things in Hollywood, behind the scenes and actors, people in the front. in front of the cameras and stuff. And you know, it's kind of disheartening, because you want to think that the people that are in these situations, the world is theirs to have, and what do? They end up being abusive and being, fighting and all this other stuff. And it really does sort of break down what we should expect when it comes to Hollywood and the people in Hollywood. Um, but I'm not even sure what this means. I mean, are there going to be more people that are going to come out now and say that Jonathan Majors also did something to them? Is it because typically that's what you see is when somebody is either found guilty or very close to being found guilty, all of a sudden more people come out and start speaking out. Is that going to happen here? I don't know. As it stands, though, he's looking, from what I could tell, what I read in the article, up to about a year in prison. And the sentencing will happen in February. Now, they could go light on him and give him less than that. But at this point, I don't even know if it matters. All the projects he had, I think he had a Spike Lee movie he was supposed to be working in, and another project he was supposed to be working in. None of those have had any updates. I'm assuming they're going to be canceled now, or he'll be recast by someone else in those projects. But the fact remains is that he's looking at a sentencing in February, up to a year in prison, which means 2025 at the latest. I have no idea what the minimum sentence would be, but anything that he would have been scheduled to be in, obviously, in the future, even if somebody decided to move forward with him, they'd have to delay it by a year at this point. So I don't know. Things aren't looking good for Jonathan Majors. And man, it's just, when you find out who people are, sometimes it can be really frustrating. And I, my heart goes out to all the people that have been affected by this. Because again, I'm sure he's not the only person in Hollywood that has done these kinds of things. And I don't even know what to say about that. I just, it is what it is, I guess. They're gonna have to move forward with someone else at this point. So I want to know what you guys think about this, though. How do you feel about this? Do you feel like he was given a fair shot? Do you think that maybe there was something else that kind of came up out of nowhere? I know these kinds of cases are polarizing in terms of like people picking one side and kind of sticking to that one side. I don't really know how I feel about that at the moment. I will say, though, that again, it was a criminal case, which means the burden of guilt to prove that he was guilty was much, much higher than a civil case. So that means that the jury had to really be looking at a lot of different stuff. And so, yeah, I would like to believe that they, dotted their I's, crossed all their T's, and looked at everything. I have to believe they did. But we'll see. There's been a few statements here and there. We'll talk more about it on the live stream this week. But yeah, let me know your thoughts and opinions on all this down below. Very curious if any of this shocks and surprised you, or is it just what you expected? Let me know down below. All right, take care, everybody. See you next time.